The ruins stretched across the valley like broken teeth, half buried under red sand and centuries of neglect. Owen Reed wiped sweat from his forehead as he climbed over another collapsed wall. His crew had abandoned this section hours ago, declaring it worthless. Nothing but old stone and faded carvings, they said. Not worth the risk of unstable ground. But Owen had seen something they missed. A pattern in the decay. The way certain stones refused to crumble despite their age. The faint shimmer of energy his scanner caught for just a moment before it vanished. He had spent 20 years salvaging dead worlds and knew when something was hiding beneath the surface. His boots crunched on crystal fragments as he descended into a crack in the ground. The temperature dropped immediately. His breath turned to mist in the narrow passage. The walls changed from rough stone to smooth metal, then to something else entirely. Something that looked almost organic, like petrified bone fused with machinery. The passage opened into a chamber so vast his helmet light could not find the far wall. Owen activated a flare and tossed it forward. The red glow revealed massive columns rising into darkness, each one carved with scenes of creatures he did not recognize. Winged forms that seemed too large to be real. Cities floating in space without ships or stations to hold them. At the center of the chamber stood a cylinder of crystallized metal, easily 50 meters tall. Energy flickered weakly along its surface in patterns that hurt to watch. Owen approached slowly, his scanner screaming warnings about unknown radiation and unstable fields. He ignored it and pressed his gloved hand against the surface that IT was warm. The crystal cleared under his touch, revealing what lay inside. Owen stumbled backward, his heart hammering. The creature was enormous, even in its curled position. Scales that might have once gleamed like polished obsidian were now dull and cracked. Wings folded tight against a body that showed every rib, every bone. The head alone was larger than his entire body. Horns swept back from a skull that belonged in ancient myths of a dragon. An actual dragon, trapped in some kind of stasis field that was clearly failing. Owen's radio crackled. His crew demanding to know his position, saying they were leaving in 1 hour with or without him. He turned off the radio and moved closer to the cylinder. Through the murky crystal, he saw one of the creature's eyes open. It fixed on him with an intensity that froze him in place. Then he felt it. A pressure in his mind, not painful but insistent. Images flooded his thoughts. A sky full of dragons, moving between stars without ships. This same creature, but healthy and magnificent, standing before beings in white armor. Those beings raising weapons. Others of her kind falling from the sky, wrapped in chains of light. Being sealed away one by one into tombs exactly like this one that the images shifted. Darkness. Endless darkness. Pain that never faded. Time stretching into infinity. 2,000 years of consciousness trapped in a failing prison, alone with only memories and the slow poison of decaying stasis fields. Owen gasped and broke the connection. His legs nearly gave out. He understood now. This was not a monster locked away for being dangerous. This was a person imprisoned by those who feared what they could not control. The architects, the image had called them, a race that died out over a millennium ago, but their prisons remained. He looked at his scanner. The stasis field was not just failing. It was killing her, had been killing her for centuries, slowly enough that she could feel every moment of it. Soon, maybe days or weeks, it would finally finish the job. Owen could walk away. Should walk away. His crew was right to leave. This place was dangerous, and she was clearly beyond saving. Whatever she had been, she was dying now. Better to let her pass in peace than risk his life on a rescue that would probably fail. He thought about spending 2,000 years trapped in a box, feeling your body slowly break down while your mind remained sharp enough to experience every second of it. Never hearing another voice, never feeling the sun, just darkness and pain and the knowledge that everyone you had ever known was dust. Owen Reed had always been the type to help stranded travelers even when it cost him money. The type to pull people from wrecks when others flew past. His crew called it stupid. His ex-wife had called it a character flaw. But he had never been able to leave someone suffering when he had the power to help. He studied the cylinder carefully. The stasis field was generated by nodes at 12 points around its circumference. Each one was connected to a power source deep underground. If he could disable enough of them, the field would collapse. The structure would probably collapse too, but at least she would not die in a cage. His crew was screaming over the radio now. Final warning before they launched. Owen turned it off completely and pulled his plasma cutter from his belt. The first node came apart with a shower of sparks. The cylinder shuddered. Cracks spread across its surface. The dragon's eye opened fully now, watching him. He felt her confusion, her disbelief. After 2,000 years of abandonment, why would anyone help her now? Owen moved to the second node. The ground beneath his feet began to shake. He did not stop. Some things were worth a risk. Some suffering demanded to be ended, whatever the cost. The dragon stirred inside her crystal tomb, and for the first time in 2 millennia, felt something other than despair. She felt hope. The 8th node exploded in a burst of ancient technology and Owen's determination. The cylinder groaned like a dying beast, cracks spreading across its surface in jagged patterns. The stasis field flickered, its sickly green light pulsing erratically. Through the clearing crystal, the dragon's massive form shifted. Owen ran to the 9th node as the floor buckled beneath him. His plasma cutter sliced through crystallized circuits that had run for 2,000 years. The structure began to scream, a high-pitched wail of failing systems that made his teeth ache. He did not need to destroy all 12, just enough to break the field's integrity. The 10th node shattered under his cutter, and the cylinder split down the middle. The dragon poured out in a cascade of stale fluid and crystallized fragments. She hit the ground hard, her body too weak to support its own massive weight. Owen rushed toward her as the ceiling began to rain debris. Up close, she was even larger than he had imagined. Her head alone was the size of his entire crew quarters. Scales that should have gleamed were cracked and dull. Wings lay crumpled against her sides like torn sails. Her breathing came in shallow, rattling gasps. Those ancient eyes found him again, filled with an emotion he understood without words. Gratitude mixed with resignation. She was free, but still dying. The chamber shook violently. A support column crashed down where Owen had been standing moments before. The dragon tried to lift her head, tried to move, but her body would not respond. 2,000 years of stasis had left her muscles atrophied beyond use. She would die here in the rubble of her prison, but at least she would die free. Owen felt her thoughts through their connection. She was showing him a path, a route through the collapsing structure to safety, telling him to run while he still could. She did not blame him. He had given her more than anyone in 20 centuries. He looked at her massive form, then at the passage she wanted him to take. Then he did what his crew always called his worst trait. He refused to give up. Owen sprinted past the dragon toward a section of wall covered in the same organic technology as the cylinder. The carvings here showed different scenes. Dragons inside ships that looked more grown than built. He pressed his hands against the wall and felt the dragon's consciousness join his, guiding him. Together, they found the control nodes. The chamber had been more than a prison. It had been a facility, and somewhere in its ancient systems was a way out. Owen followed her instructions, pressing specific points in a sequence that hurt his head to remember. The wall split apart, revealing a dark tunnel beyond. But the tunnel was not enough. The dragon could not walk, could barely breathe. He needed something more. She showed him. Deeper in the complex, past 3 junctions, and through a door that responded to her presence alone. An emergency system, a transport mechanism designed for injured dragons. If it still worked after so long, if the power held, if the facility did not collapse on them first. Owen ran. The floor tilted as the ground beneath the structure gave way. He slid down a corridor that was never meant for human feet, catching himself on protrusions that might have been decorative or functional. The door stood before him, marked with symbols that glowed faintly in recognition of the dragon's proximity through their mental link. IT opened. Inside sat a platform of the same biotechnological design as everything else. organic metal that pulsed with faint life. Owen's scanner showed it still had power, still had function. He triggered the activation sequence the dragon fed into his mind, and the platform hummed to life. It lifted from the floor and glided down the corridor toward the main chamber. The ceiling was coming down in sheets now. Owen leaped onto the platform as it passed, riding it back to where the dragon lay. She watched his approach with something like wonder. After so long alone, here was this small creature refusing to abandon her. The platform settled beside her massive head. Owen jumped down and tried to push her toward it, knowing it was useless. She weighed several tons, even in her emaciated state. But she understood what he was trying to do. Drawing on reserves she did not know she still had, the dragon dragged herself onto the platform. Her body filled it completely, tail hanging over the edge. Owen jumped on as a support beam, crashed where he had been standing. The platform lurched into motion, following the route programmed into it millennia ago. They raced through collapsing corridors as the entire facility began to sink into the unstable ground. The dragon's breathing grew more labored. The poison from the failing stasis was spreading through her system now that the field was gone. She had minutes, maybe less. The platform burst from the tunnel into the red sunlight of the valley. Behind them, the ruins collapsed inward with a roar of failing stone and ancient technology. Dust billowed out in a massive cloud that blotted out the sky. Owen's ship was gone. His crew had kept their word and left without him. But the dragon was showing him something else. Another structure, hidden beneath the sand a kilometer away. Not a prison this time. A vessel. Her vessel, left behind when the architects captured her. If it still functioned, if they could reach it, the platform began to move again, following a signal only the dragon could sense. Owen looked at her massive form, already knowing what he would find when he checked her vital signs. She was dying faster now. The stasis poison was in her blood, her organs. Being free meant she could finally finish dying, but she was directing them toward her ship with the last of her strength, trying to save the human who had saved her, trying to give him a way off this dead world. Owen held onto the platform as they glided across the sand. His mind raced through options, ways to help, ways to fix this. He had not come this far just to watch her die in the open air. There had to be something in her ship, some medical system, some way to purge the poison. The vessel rose from the sand ahead, responding to her presence. Ancient and alien, but still alive, still waiting for its mistress to return. They had a chance. The ship opened like a flower as they approached, panels of biometal peeling back to reveal an interior that glowed with soft amber light. The platform carried them through an entrance sized for a creature far larger than any modern vessel would accommodate. Inside, the walls pulsed gently, responding to the dragon's presence after 2,000 years of silence. Owen helped guide the platform to what he assumed was a medical bay. The dragon's consciousness was fading, her mental voice growing weaker with each passing moment. But she managed to show him the basics. How to activate the scanning systems. How to read the displays that appeared in flowing script he should not have been able to understand, but somehow could through their link. The news was worse than he feared. The stasis poison had integrated into her cellular structure, not just killing her, but rewriting her biology to break down from within. The medical system began emergency protocols, flooding her body with treatments designed for dragon physiology. But the displays showed red indicators spreading across the dragon's form. Too much damage. Too much time. Owen refused to accept it. He dove into the ship's database, searching for anything that could help. The dragon tried to tell him to stop, to take the ship and save himself. She had already accepted her fate. Better to die here, tended by someone who cared, than alone in that crystal tomb. But Owen's desperate search found something. A reference to stellar radiation. Dragons did not just live near stars. They fed on certain types of stellar energy to heal and regenerate. The right kind of radiation could purge toxins, repair damage, restore vitality. It was how they survived for thousands of years. The nearest source was 3 weeks away through the shipping lanes. The dragon would be dead in hours. Owen pulled up the navigation systems and began calculating alternative routes. Dangerous routes, paths through zones marked as restricted or hazardous, places no sane pilot would venture. The dragon felt his intention and tried to protest, but he was already laying in the course. The ship lifted from the sand with a thought. It responded to the dragon's will, and through their connection to his. Owen sealed the medical bay and jumped into what he assumed was the pilot's nest. The controls were nothing like any ship he had flown, but they felt right somehow, as if the vessel understood what he needed and adapted to meet him halfway. They broke atmosphere at speeds that would have torn apart his old salvage ship. The dragon's vessel cut through space like it was meant to be there. Responding to urgency, Owen felt in his bones. Behind them, the planet Varos, 7 shrank to a point of light. Ahead lay 3 weeks of the most dangerous flying he had ever attempted. The first 2 days went smoothly. The ship's speed was incredible, cutting travel time in ways Owen did not fully understand. The dragon rested in the medical bay, sustained by systems that were buying her time but not healing her. Owen spent hours sitting beside her massive head, talking to her even when she was too weak to respond. He told her about Earth, about humanity's stumbling path to the stars, about his failed marriage and his crew that had abandoned him, about feeling alone even in crowded stations. She listened when she could, sharing fragments of her own memories. A galaxy once filled with dragons, moving freely between worlds. Her role as a queen, not through power but through wisdom and age. The day the architects came with their weapons of light, that on the 3rd day, everything changed. That Owen's old crew had reported the discovery to the Galactic Heritage Commission. The Commission had shared the information with the Council, and the Council had declared the dragon a potential threat that must be contained for study. Warrants were issued. Ships began searching, but worse than the official response was the unofficial one. The Perpetuity sect, descendants of those who had worshipped the architects, believed dragons should remain imprisoned. They saw the creatures as chaos incarnate, too powerful and too dangerous to exist freely. When news spread that a dragon had been released, they mobilized. The ship's sensors picked up the pursuit vessels on the 4th day. 3 heavy cruisers, armed with weapons specifically designed for hunting large organic targets. They broadcast a demand for Owen to surrender the dragon for containment. For her own good, they said, for the safety of the galaxy. Owen ignored the transmission and pushed the ship faster. The dragon stirred, feeling his fear through their bond. She urged him to land on any habitable world and leave her there. They would not hurt him if he cooperated. He had already done more than anyone could ask. Instead, Owen plotted a course through the Razor Drift, a region of space filled with debris fields and unstable energy pockets. His old crew had called him crazy for even suggesting salvage runs there. But he knew if he could navigate it, the pursuit ships would have to slow down or risk destruction. The dragon felt his decision, and something like pride touched her fading consciousness. This human was either very brave or very stupid, possibly both. It reminded her of the old days, when young dragons would attempt impossible feats just to prove they could. The ship plunged into the drift. Debris hammered against their shields as Owen wove between wrecks and energy storms. The pursuit vessels followed, but fell behind, their larger frames unable to match the dragon ship's agility. One took a hit from a debris cluster and broke off. The other 2 pressed on. Determined to complete their mission, Owen's hands moved across the controls, the ship responding to his thoughts as much as his touch. The dragon's consciousness joined his, her ancient experience guiding him through dangers he could not see coming. Together, human intuition and dragon wisdom, they danced through hazards that should have killed them a dozen times over. They emerged from the drift 18 hours later with both pursuit ships lost somewhere in the wreckage behind them. But the dragon's condition had worsened. The stress of the chase combined with the poison's progression left her barely clinging to consciousness. Owen checked the navigation. Still over 2 weeks to the radiation source. She would never make it, that he had to find another way. Had to find something closer. The ship's database showed a small station 7 days ahead. Medical facilities. Not designed for dragons, but maybe they would have something. Anything The dragon whispered in his mind not to risk it, but Owen was already changing course. Station Outreach hung in the void like a metal flower, its docking petals extended to catch passing traders. Owen brought the dragon's ship in slowly, trying not to draw attention to its unusual design. The station's automated systems pinged him for identification. He transmitted the credentials from his old salvage license, hoping they had not been revoked yet. The station cleared him for docking, but flagged his vessel for inspection. Owen knew he had minutes before someone came to investigate. He sealed the medical bay completely, hoping the ship's unusual architecture would hide what lay inside. Then he grabbed a datapad and headed for the station's medical district. The markets were crowded with a dozen species, all going about their business. Owen moved quickly through the press of bodies, searching for someone who looked like they would help rather than report him. Most of the merchants avoided eye contact. They knew trouble when they saw it. He found her in a small clinic tucked between a parts dealer and a food vendor. The sign above the door read, Petra's Medical Supply, in 5 languages. Inside, a young woman with 4 arms and pale blue skin was organizing containers of medication. She looked up as Owen entered, her large eyes assessing him in an instant. He did not waste time with lies. He told her about the dragon, about the poison, about the desperate need for anything that might help. Petra listened without interruption, her expression shifting from skepticism to fascination to concern. When he finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Then she began pulling specific medications from her shelves. Broad-spectrum toxin binders, cellular regeneration boosters, compounds designed for massive creatures like the rock whales of the outer systems. She explained each one quickly, telling him dosages that might work for something dragon-sized. She had no way to be sure. Owen asked how much it would cost. Petra looked at him with those huge eyes and said nothing, just handed him the medications and a portable diagnostic scanner. When he tried to insist on payment, she shook her head. Some stories were bigger than profit. If even half of what he said was true, a dragon needed help. That was reason enough. She followed him back to the ship. Owen tried to discourage her, explaining the danger, the warrants, the perpetuity sect. She waved it all away with 3 of her 4 hands. She was a medical professional, and she had just given medications to someone attempting emergency treatment on a legendary creature. She was already involved. Might as well see it through. The dragon was barely conscious when they entered the medical bay. Petra froze at the sight of her, overcome by the sheer scale of the creature. Then her professional training kicked in, and she moved forward, scanning the dragon's vital signs with her portable device. The readings made her whistle low. She and Owen worked together, administering the medications through the ship's medical systems. The toxin binders went in first, attempting to capture the stasis poison before it could do more damage. The regeneration boosters followed, trying to jumpstart healing processes that had been dormant for 2,000 years. The dragon's body shuddered with each injection, but she did not wake. Hours passed. The medications seemed to slow the deterioration, but not stop it. Petra ran scan after scan, trying different combinations and dosages. Owen stayed beside the dragon's head, maintaining their mental connection even though she could not respond. Through the link, he felt her fading like a candle burning its last. Petra finally stepped back, all 4 hands shaking with exhaustion. She had done everything she could with what they had, but it was not enough. The dragon needed the stellar radiation. Anything else was just buying time. Station security arrived at the dock, responding to reports of an unusual vessel. Owen watched through the ship's sensors as armed officers surrounded his docking port. He could run, but they were too close. The ship would never clear the station before they disabled it. Petra saw his expression and made a decision. She activated her comm and called in a favor from the station administrator, an old friend who owed her for past help. Within minutes, the security officers received new orders. Give a strange ship 6 hours to complete repairs before inspection. The administrator did not know what was really happening. Did not need to. He trusted Petra's judgment. But 6 hours would not be enough. Owen checked the navigation again. The stellar radiation source was still 10 days away at maximum speed. The dragon would not survive half that. He felt tears of frustration building. He had come so far, done so much, and it still was not enough. Petra was working at one of the ship's consoles, her four hands moving rapidly across controls she was learning to read. She made a sound of discovery and called Owen over. The database had information on stellar radiation sources. Not just the primary one Owen had been heading for. There were others. Smaller sources. Closer sources. One was only 3 days away. A stellar nursery inside a region of space controlled by the Harmonious Collective. An isolationist civilization that did not allow outsiders into their territory. Anyone who entered without permission was destroyed without warning. It had been there all along in the database, but marked as inaccessible. Owen looked at the dragon's failing body. 3 days versus 10 days. The difference between a slim chance and no chance. But the collective did not negotiate, did not grant exceptions. They had maintained their isolation for over 1,000 years, protecting their stellar nurseries as sacred spaces. Petra saw where his thoughts were going. She started to protest, to explain just how serious the collective was about their boundaries. They had weapons that could disintegrate entire fleets. They would not listen to pleas for mercy or explanations about dying dragons. Owen was already plotting the course. The dragon had survived 2,000 years in a crystal tomb. She had endured pain that would have broken anyone else. She deserved every chance, no matter how small. If the collective wanted to destroy them for trying, so be it. At least they would die trying rather than giving up. Petra looked at him for a long moment. Then she sat down at the co-pilot position and began running calculations. If they were going to do something this monumentally stupid, they should at least do it efficiently. The ship undocked from outreach before the 6 hours expired. Security was too busy dealing with a sudden influx of traders to notice. Or perhaps the administrator looked the other way. Either way, they made it clear before anyone could stop them. 3 days to the collective's territory. 3 days to convince an isolationist civilization to allow them access to their sacred stellar nurseries. 3 days before the dragon's body gave out completely. Owen pushed the ship to its maximum speed and prayed to whatever gods might listen that they would make it. The boundary of collective space was marked by warning beacons in a dozen languages. Each message was clear and identical. Turn back or be destroyed. No exceptions. No negotiations. The Harmonious Collective tolerated no intrusion into their sacred territories. Violators would be eliminated instantly. Owen guided the ship past the first beacon. Immediately, sensors detected multiple vessels moving to intercept. Sleek craft that seemed to bend light around themselves, making them nearly invisible until they wanted to be seen. They surrounded the dragon ship in a loose formation, weapons powered and ready. A transmission came through in a synthesized voice devoid of emotion. It identified them as trespassers and demanded immediate withdrawal. Failure to comply would result in destruction. No trial, no discussion, just erasure from existence. Petra began to broadcast a response, but Owen stopped her. Word would not work here. The collective had heard every excuse, every plea, every reason over 1,000 years. They had never wavered once. But maybe, just maybe, they had never encountered a dragon before. Owen reached out to the dragon through their mental link. She was barely conscious, her mind flickering like a candle in a storm. But she felt his intention and understood. Using the last of her strength, she projected her memories outward, not just to Owen but through the ship's systems, broadcasting in ways only dragon technology could achieve. The collective vessels received the transmission. For a moment, nothing happened. Then Owen felt something vast and ancient touch his mind. Not one consciousness, but many, linked together in a harmony that defied human understanding. The collective was aptly named. They were individuals who had merged their minds into something greater. They saw through the dragon's memories. Saw her kind moving between stars when the galaxy was young. Saw dragons teaching the ancestors of the collective how to achieve space flight, how to harmonize their minds, how to tend stellar nurseries as gardens rather than resource points. Saw the ancient treaty between dragons and the early collective, a pact of mutual respect and shared guardianship of newborn stars. They saw her imprisonment, her suffering, 2,000 years of darkness and poison. And they saw Owen, a human who knew nothing of dragons or ancient treaties, who simply could not leave someone to suffer alone, who risked everything for a creature he had just met. The collective vessels maintained their formation, but their weapons powered down. The synthesized voice returned, but this time it carried something that might have been emotion. They acknowledged the ancient treaty. They recognized the Dragon Queen. But their laws had changed over 2 millennia. Outsiders were forbidden from their nurseries. The law existed to protect the sacred spaces from exploitation. Owen found his voice. He explained that he understood their caution, that he respected their laws. But the dragon would die without the radiation. She had already suffered for 2,000 years because others feared what she represented. Would the collective let her die now, when a means to save her existed within their grasp? The collective was silent. Owen could feel them debating, thousands of minds processing the dilemma from every angle. Ancient obligation versus current law. Compassion versus the rules that kept their society functioning. The dragon's past service versus the risk of setting precedent. Finally, they responded. They would allow the dragon to approach the stellar nursery. But Owen must submit to judgment first. The trial of worth. An ancient test that exposed the deepest truths of a person's mind. If he harbored any deception or selfish intent, the trial would kill him. Only if his motivations were pure would they grant access. Petra protested immediately. The trial of worth had a mortality rate of over 70% for those with normal levels of self-interest. Even good people failed it if they had hidden agendas or unconscious biases. Owen would be torn apart by the neural interface. Owen did not hesitate. He agreed. The dragon stirred in the medical bay, trying to protest through their weakened link. But he had already made his choice. He would not come this far and fail because he was afraid of judgment that a collective vessel docked with their ship. 3 figures emerged, their bodies humanoid, but their movements too synchronized to be individuals. They carried a device that looked like a crown of crystallized light. They explained the process. Owen would wear the crown. It would interface with his neural patterns and expose everything he was. Every thought, every motive, every hidden corner of his psyche that if he was found wanting, his brain would be burned out in an instant. If he was found worthy, they would allow the dragon to be healed. The choice was his. Owen sat down and let them place the crown on his head. The last thing he saw before the interface activated was Petra's worried face and the dragon watching from the medical bay. Too weak to move, but trying desperately to reach him through their bond. The crown lit up, and Owen's world dissolved into white light. The collective tore through his consciousness like a hurricane. They examined every memory, every decision, every moment of weakness and strength. They saw his failed marriage, ended because he cared more about strangers than building a life together. They saw him pulling survivors from wrecks, while more profitable salvage floated past. They saw years of loneliness, of feeling disconnected from his own species, because they could not understand why he helped people who would never repay him. They saw him finding the dragon and feeling recognition. Here was someone who understood suffering, who had endured isolation beyond human comprehension. The collective watched as Owen made the decision to free her, knowing it would cost him his crew and possibly his life. They analyzed his motivations from every angle, searching for hidden selfishness or glory-seeking. What they found was simpler than that. Owen helped because he could not do otherwise. Because leaving someone to suffer when he had the power to help would have destroyed something fundamental in him. He did not expect reward or recognition. He simply could not walk away. The collective reached deeper, finding the moment when Owen decided to risk everything for a dying stranger. The choice to attempt the journey to the stellar radiation source. The determination to find alternatives when the first path seemed impossible. The willingness to face the collective's judgment, knowing he would probably die. All of it stemmed from one basic truth. Owen Reed could not abandon someone who needed help. It was not heroism or nobility. It was just who he was, for better or worse. The crown deactivated. Owen collapsed, his mind reeling from the invasive examination. Petra caught him before he hit the floor. The collective representatives stood in silence for a moment that stretched into eternity. Then they spoke. Owen's intentions were pure, his motivations genuine. He had passed the trial of worth. The dragon would be allowed to enter the stellar nursery and receive healing. They would guide the ship personally and ensure her recovery. Owen could barely process the words through his mental exhaustion, but he felt the dragon's consciousness surge with renewed strength. She had felt everything through their bond, had experienced his judgment as if it were her own, and she understood now why this human had refused to abandon her. Some beings helped because it benefited them. Others helped because it was expected. But Owen helped because the alternative was unthinkable. Because suffering demanded response, regardless of risk or reward. The collective vessels formed an escort around the dragon ship and guided them deeper into their territory. The stellar nursery was nothing like Owen had imagined. Newborn stars clustered together in a formation that seemed almost intentional, their light weaving through clouds of gas and dust in colors that hurt to name. The radiation here was not harsh or burning. It felt alive somehow, pulsing with energy that made his skin tingle even through the ship's shielding. The collective guided them to the heart of the nursery, where three young stars danced around each other in a gravitational ballet. The radiation here was strongest, concentrated in ways that only occurred in these rare cosmic formations. They positioned the dragon ship at the optimal point and opened the medical bay's external panels. Raw stellar energy poured in. The dragon's body began to glow from within, scales that had been dull and cracked for 2,000 years starting to shimmer with their true color. Deep obsidian touched with veins of gold and crimson. Owen watched through the viewing port as she absorbed the radiation like a flower drinking rain after a drought. The process took 3 days. The collective maintained their vigil, ensuring no external ships approached. Word had spread through the galaxy about the dragon's release, and dozens of factions now sought her. Some wanted to study her. Others wanted to imprison her again. The Perpetuity sect wanted her dead, believing dragons were too dangerous to exist. But none could enter collective space without permission. For 3 days, the dragon healed under the protection of an isolationist civilization moved by an ancient treaty and a human's genuine compassion. Owen stayed beside her throughout, monitoring her recovery through both the ship's systems and their mental link. He felt her consciousness growing stronger hour by hour, felt the poison being purged from her cells as her body remembered how to heal itself, felt 2,000 years of damage slowly reversing. Petri used the time to study the ship's database, learning about dragons and their place in galactic history. She discovered that dragons had not just been powerful. They had been the first to achieve true interstellar civilization. They had guided younger races, shared knowledge freely, and asked for nothing in return except that those races treat the galaxy with respect. The architects had feared them for that generosity, had convinced themselves that such power could not be given freely without hidden agenda. They had waged a secret war, imprisoning dragons one by one until none remained free. Then the architects themselves had fallen, their civilization collapsing under the weight of their own paranoia. On the morning of the 4th day, the dragon stood. Owen felt it through their bond before he saw it. A surge of strength and vitality that made him gasp. He ran to the medical bay to find her on her feet, wings spread wide and scales gleaming like polished gems. She was magnificent, ancient and terrible and beautiful in ways that defied description. Her eyes found his, and Owen felt her gratitude wash over him like a wave. She had been ready to die in that crystal tomb, had accepted it as her fate after so long alone. But this strange human had refused to let her, had risked everything to free her and then risked more to save her. She owed him a debt that could never be fully repaid. Owen told her through their link that she owed him nothing. He had done what anyone should do. She responded with something that might have been dragon laughter. Humans she sent were not like anyone else. That was becoming very clear. The collective contacted them with news. The Galactic Council had issued an emergency session. They wanted to address the dragon situation. Some council members were calling for her immediate containment. Others argued for her freedom. The debate had paralyzed galactic governance for days. They needed resolution. The dragon made a decision. She would address the council personally. She would show them that dragons chose to be guardians, not conquerors. That power used with wisdom was not something to fear. She asked Owen and Petra if they would stand with her. Owen agreed without hesitation. Petra took longer to consider, but eventually nodded. They had come this far together. Might as well see it through to the end. The collective offered to host the council session in neutral space. Their presence would ensure no violence occurred during the proceedings. Representatives from across the galaxy gathered, many seeing a dragon for the first time in their lives. Some were awed. Others were terrified. The Perpetuity sect sent observers, but no official representatives, a fact that made everyone nervous. The dragon addressed the assembly in a voice that resonated in minds rather than ears. She spoke of the ancient past, of what her kind had been before fear destroyed them. She did not hide her power, but demonstrated it could be controlled. She did not demand anything, but asked only for the chance to prove herself through action rather than reputation. The council debated for hours. Then, just as they were moving toward a vote, alarms blared. Perpetuity sect vessels had breached the perimeter. They were launching an attack, determined to kill the dragon, even if it meant starting a war with the collective. Weapons fire lit up space around the assembly station. The collective moved to intercept, but the sect had brought enough ships to overwhelm even their defenses. A missile broke through, aimed directly at the dragon's position. It was designed specifically for killing her kind, reverse-engineered from ancient architect technology. Owen saw it coming, saw that it would kill not just the dragon, but everyone in the assembly chamber. Without thinking, he threw himself between the dragon and the incoming weapon. His body was far too small to block the missile, but maybe his presence would trigger its proximity sensors early, detonating it before it reached her. The dragon's mind touched his in that frozen instant. She felt his intention, his willingness to die so she could live. After all she had endured, after all he had done to save her, he was still trying to protect her. Time seemed to slow. The dragon moved faster than anything her size should be able to move. She wrapped her body around Owen and channeled the stellar radiation she had absorbed into a shield. The missile detonated against her scales in a blast of ancient fire. When the light cleared, the dragon stood unharmed. The stellar radiation had restored her to full strength, making her tougher than the weapons designed to kill her weaker past self. But Owen lay unconscious in her protective embrace, his body stressed beyond limits by proximity to the blast. The dragon roared, a sound that made the station shake. She could have destroyed the sect vessels with a thought, could have ended the threat permanently. The assembled council watched to see what she would choose, violence or mercy. She chose neither and both. Using her recovered abilities, she disabled every sect vessel without destroying them, captured them intact with fields of manipulated gravity, proved her power while refusing to kill those who sought her death. Then she turned her attention to Owen, using her own life force to stabilize him as he had once helped her. The council saw everything, saw the dragon's restraint, saw her choose to save rather than destroy, saw the bond between her and the human who had freed her from eternal imprisonment. When a vote came, it was unanimous. The dragon would be free to move through galactic space, free to seek out any others of her kind who might still be imprisoned, free to be what she had always been, a guardian, not a threat. Owen woke 3 days later in a medical facility, his body still healing. The dragon sat beside him in a smaller form she had learned to take, no bigger than a large horse. She told him what had happened, how the council had decided, how the galaxy was slowly accepting that ancient dragons could return. She asked what he wanted to do now. He had given up everything to save her. His crew, his ship, his old life. She could give him wealth, status, anything he desired. Owen considered for a long moment. Then he said he wanted to help her find the others. If there were more dragons still imprisoned, still suffering alone in crystal tombs, they deserved to be freed. That seemed like important work. The dragon felt warmth spread through her consciousness. After 2,000 years of isolation, she had found not just freedom, but companionship. A partner who understood what really mattered. Together, they would search the forgotten places of the galaxy. Together, they would bring her people home. Petra decided to join them. Someone needed to keep them from getting killed by their own heroic stupidity. Plus, she admitted, traveling with a dragon and documenting their discoveries would make for incredible research. They left the collective's territory a week later in the dragon ship, now registered officially with the Galactic Council. Their mission was simple: find the lost dragons, free them from their prisons, show the galaxy that some ancient powers were meant to protect, not destroy. Owen stood in the pilot's nest, feeling the dragon's consciousness merged with his through their permanent bond. Ahead lay a galaxy full of secrets and forgotten tombs. Behind lay a legend reborn through compassion and courage. Some things were worth the risk. Some suffering demanded response. And sometimes, refusing to abandon someone in darkness could change the entire galaxy. The ship jumped to faster-than-light speed, carrying them toward the first set of coordinates, toward another dragon waiting in another tomb, toward a future none of them could have imagined when Owen first decided he could not walk away from suffering. The Dragon Queen was free, and she would make sure none of her kind stayed imprisoned ever again.